that brings us through to our news and commentary section, which will bring us home, but we have a long road ahead of us before we sleep. So let's get into it. First of all, Teos, we're number two. We're number two. We're number two.
Yeah, I mean,
According to Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG talk podcast, we were voted the second best podcast for 2022 in the category of talk, not actual play, since we don't actually play on the podcast. Who was number one? Well, it was none other than Mike Shea, Sly Flourish. So yeah, Mike, you're number one. We all knew it. We Now it's official. So congratulations.
yeah.
Good job. And luckily, once you win this, you are taken out of the running for next
Oh,
year.
thank goodness.
So we have a chance next year.
I don't think
We
that's
have a
actually
chance
true,
next year.
but I am
Yeah.
really thankful to everybody who voted, because these kinds of internet things are not easy to win or get number two. So earning number two is really quite enormous. So thank you very much to everybody who was part of that. That's amazing. I don't know that we gave Mike Shea the sweats, but it was fun, and we had some really enjoyable banter, Mike Shea and the two of us, about this. Obviously, his work is incredible. So is Morris's podcast, and everybody who's on that list. There are so many on there that are really just fantastic works, and I think that if they could mobilize fans, would leave us in the dust. So I'm super thankful. Really neat. It was a nice pick me up to hear that. So awesome. I didn't want to be number one
Thank
anyway.
you all for your votes. Yeah, we lose our street credit for number one.
Yeah, no, we're indie, not like that sold out Mike Shea, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the OG elephant in the room. Thank you to one of our listeners for saying you missed the opportunity for the OG elephant, and I'm like, yeah, I feel ashamed that I didn't think of that. So thank you. So where do we stand with the OGL, Teos? What's going on? Did anything
wow.
important happen since the last time we
Oh, just
recorded?
a bit. I mean, what a reversal. The week started with like coverage in NPR, and it just looked to be like more of the same, where this issue is going to grow and grow and grow and just spin out of control. And yeah, I mean, it really was looking as dark as it could be, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, at one point, you had people who don't even play coming up and asking you what's going on with this because they heard it on NPR or on some other, national or international news source. My first week of my class was last week, and
Mm.
normally when I start talking about the business side of things, people, even the most hardcore gamers, don't really know what the OGL is. Many don't even know what like D&D Beyond is or DM's Guild. And I had half the class going, "Yeah, we need to talk about this open gaming license." I'm like, "Yeah, we probably do. Let's get to that a little later in the semester," hoping that it would resolve itself in 3 months. But
Yeah.
it seems that maybe we have resolved it in less than 24 hours after we recorded.
It was incredible. On Wednesday, January 25th, D&D Beyond posted on Twitter saying that more than 10,000 people had responded to the survey, and that the draft 1.2 had not hit the mark for our community. And they pointed to a fact page, an FAQ page that would be updated. And just 2 days after that, that page was gone, because there was this incredible post from Wizards of the Coast saying the survey results are super clear. We don't need to hear more. We're shutting down the survey as well, and we are making what were really two huge changes, and then there's a third point they make. So they make 3 points. One, we are leaving the OGL 1.0A in place as is, untouched, which I mean, whenever I would talk to folks about what would be, what would you hope in your dreamiest of dreams, right? That would be one. And then the second just exceeded basically anything that anyone had thought would be possible, which is, let's make the entire SRD 5.1, so that's the current SRD, available under a Creative Commons license. So for commercial use, it is out there already. It even includes things you wouldn't think maybe would be included, like names of name Mind Flayer, the name Beholder, not the stats. Strad von Zarich. So, and then the third point they made is you choose which you prefer to use. And that was fascinating because, you now have this real option of whether you want to keep on using 1.0a as you have. And if you have a project that's already being done and it's maybe part 2 of it, you can do that, but you can also just use the Creative Commons. Anything about that you want to say, Shawn?
Yeah, it goes way beyond what people were asking for. What reasonable people were asking for, it went way beyond that. And even what some unreasonable people were asking for, it went beyond that as well. This, the line in the sand for most people was do not revoke the OGL 1.0a. And so they're like, oh, okay, there. We're not going to revoke it. And we'll just throw it all in Creative Commons. Do what you want. Are there still going to be issues? There sure are still going to be issues. Because anytime lawyers are involved, there are going to be issues. Whether they are issues that are there or issues that are made up by lawyers in order to continue to do their lawyerly things. And I have many lawyer friends and family, so no offense to lawyers out there. You guys got to do your thing and we're good. But if people are still complaining about it at this point, then they're either just hating on Wizards for the purpose of hating on Wizards, or they're marketing something. They're trying to sell something else. Because this is resolved now.
Right.
You can continue to put out your 5th edition works. There's no reason you can't. That puts the ground back under the feet of creators. It's all good. Will there be more issues coming? Absolutely. But at least for now, there's no reason not to move forward with plans.
Yeah, and one of the things that was really amazing to me was to try to and kind of behind why this was such a huge surprise is that you would think that Wizards had initiated this process for some reasons, and those reasons were big. That's why they did such a big thing. And they wrote on their blog post, so what about the goals that drove us when we started this process? We wanted to protect the D&D play experience into the future. We still want to do that with your help. We're grateful this community is passionate and active because we'll need your help protecting the game's inclusive and welcoming nature. Hard to know what that really means, right? They said, we wanted to limit the OGL to TTRPGs. With this new approach, we are setting that aside and counting on your choices to define the future of play. And so, they really are sticking to their guns here about sort of what this is about. And so it makes you think a lot about what can we make of these changes, because whatever Wizards of the Coast goals were, either the goals were flawed or they were doing a bunch of and they were doing things without much planning, right? So for example, the first iteration, the leaked version, was all about royalties. And the second version, the royalties were completely gone. So were those important or not? If they weren't important, why were they there in such huge numbers? Like, how was it so ill thought out? If they really were a critical part of what was important to them, then how are they going to make that up, right? If they have some revenue line item projection that was based on this, well, that's got to be zeroed out. And where's that going to come from? Or, there's so many questions that aren't answered and won't probably ever be answered, because history can never quite get to the truth at that level of detail. But it's really quite fascinating, right? Either they didn't have very defined plans and thus it could all be chucked aside, or they did and now things really have to be reimagined. What is their actual plan for?
Well, when I recorded the Eldritch Lorecast Monday last week, I basically said exactly this. I addressed them directly. I took off my Ghostfire Gaming hat and
I like that. I saw that
and said, listen, you need to decide what your goals are, which goals can move, which goals are set in concrete, and then create the license to achieve those specific goals and let everything else go. And I think that's pretty much what they did. They again underestimated the audience for their game. and what they would do and how they consume their games and their content. And once they figured that out, they decided to get rid of everything that they were thinking before, at least in terms of this open gaming license, and said, if people are going to make movies from our stuff, we'll have that fight down the road. It's not worth trying to fight it out right now in this nebulous thing that's going to apply to people who it doesn't even need to apply to. Right? How many companies in the world are going to try to make a D&D movie?
Or
Probably
pantomime.
just one.
Right? I mean, pantomime was on
Exactly.
the original draft
Yes.
version for a thing you couldn't
Right.
do. Like, it's so amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to invest $100 million to make a movie that's going to be just like the D&D movie, or video game, or virtual tabletop, or character generator, or whatever. You, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro is the big player in this space, and I think they decided, okay, let's just ignore all of this stuff that's not beneath us, but that cannot rival us because of the resources we have.
Yeah.
And we'll punt the ball down the field a ways. That was our sports reference for Mike Shea for the week. We'll punt the ball down the field, and we'll deal with these other things later because the fallout right now is too great.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's very wise because, you can look at things like, Lord of the Rings movie, right? Those kinds of things, on one hand, can be viewed as competitive, but of course they're not, right? They lead everybody to go and think about these kinds of things and look for those kinds of experiences, right? Stranger Things has obviously been an enormous boost. Why would you want to stop anybody from possibly doing something like that, right? And using D&D material in the game, right? To reference things like Vecna and so on, right? Like you want that to happen, right? So that searches of Vecna do go through the roof, right? And so it is a fine line. It is tough. And I do think, Wizards logically does want to protect their IP and think about where the industry could get out of hand and leave them behind. That is natural to want to do that you'd want to do that to be smart. But you also have to know when to step back, which amazingly they did. And part of that was, one of the big lessons is the community bonded together in a way that they've never done before. And even over things like people who have done really hateful things in the industry, right? Dave Chalker made this point today on Mastodon. Like there are some people who have been such bad actors and the community did not rally that way around it and should, right? But somehow here, it wasn't just competitors, though certainly the competitors sharpened their knives, but it was allies, it was partners, it was the person who had announced their product line just a few months ago. It was really so broad based, and that was incredible to see. And I think now the entire industry is on notice that could potentially happen if someone were to do something so significantly problematically. I think you have to wonder how this impacts one D&D, Shawn.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the allies talking about how bad this was much stronger than the normal din of complaints and outrage. I know that I had several conversations with people at Wizards of the Coast, not decision makers, but behind the scenes, and they didn't understand what the big deal was for some of these things. For some of it they understood, some of it they didn't. And my being able to take them step by step through me as a creator, this is why this is bad for me. And then there was this recognition of, oh, I'd never thought of it in those terms. That's when we started to see progress being made, when the people who Wizards consider partners or friends were also saying these things. And behind the scenes, a reasonable conversation could be had in order to make progress. And hopefully one D&D is now a whole different topic, right? Because there was conjecture from folks like you and I that one D&D was being done because it was the 50th anniversary, so you want to take advantage of that, but also because we needed to get rid of the open gaming license for various reasons. So we have a new edition
or partnerships with other companies.
The open gaming license, right now that the one open gaming license and the Creative Commons SRD is a thing. What happens with one D&D are the business reasons for that going forward still the same? And if the business reasons change, does that change what's going to happen in the development of the game? And we haven't seen a new packet in a long time for obvious reasons. So how does that affect what we're going to see in one
Yeah.
D&D? Will we see one D&D at all? Will we continue with 5th edition? Will we get there are so many different ways that Wizards could go here. And I don't know enough about their business side of things to know what the path forward, what the best path forward would be, what the most profitable path forward would be, what the most fan friendly path forward would be. Getting all of those things to come together in a single plan is challenging, but hey, that's why
Yeah.
the people with the C's in front of their names hopefully are there to make the best decisions.
Yeah. Working with the teams. And you know, to that end, and speaking to what you said a little bit ago about internal conversations, it was really nice to see, and in some cases, members of Wizards did reach out to community people. There was an influencer account that sent emails to all of a number of people who are on a sort of influence group that can receive like product reviews and who are streaming partners and things like that. And so, you know, we received that. Both emails that we received were really extremely well written, right? Very different than that first blog post that was such an airball. But
Now, when Teo says we, he's talking about him and other influencers. He's
oh,
not talking about
I
me.
mean,
I did not get any such email. Just to be clear.
anyway, yeah, you are
Yeah.
more indie than I am. But
Yes.
I really was thankful. I mean, I'm thankful to be on that list, but also very thankful to see the care that was taken towards that, which is exactly what you want to see in these types of situations. And there is, you know, more of an open channel now towards, you know, please tell us what you're seeing and how you're seeing it. And I think that could tie into one D&D as well, because I think before with one D&D, you know, I wanted to be a little reserved in my judgment of it because you know, I don't know where I mean, some of it's to be fair, right? I don't know how it'll change over time. I could have been super critical about D&D Next, and look how great 5e is, right? So you never know how things will exactly shape. But I think we may see folks be a little more critical of it, and I don't mean in just a negative, but to critique it, right? To analyze it and fairly say what they're seeing and not seeing, and hopefully that is healthy rather than the negative, right? That it leads to kind of adjustments and changes and so on. And I know that when I've spoken about the OGL through responding to these types of things, I've also included in it feedback about the SRD or the one D&D, because I think that one D&D links to this, right? It's around their goals and execution, and it's worth re-examining that, right? Like, so things like survey design, right? Are you getting the right questions, the right feedback? That's really important. One last thing I wanted to hit on this, Shawn, which is the question has often come up: what should creators do? And a number of folks have asked me, whether it's through Patreon or other methods, saying, like, what do we do? Should we use the OGL? Should we use the Creative Commons? Sort of, what's the difference? And I reached out to Alex Kammer, who has been on a really good series of RPG bot podcasts talking about all the legal issues. He's going to be on that show again, so keep an eye out for that. And he agreed that in most cases, a creator for a future product would probably use the CC license. That's probably the easiest way to go. But projects that are already on OGL 1.a, or if it's a series and wants to link to other open content under 1.0a, then continuing on with that is just fine. Right? There's no reason not to. So it's a little bit of a fine line, and I think we'll see a lot of other folks examine that question. But at least that's my initial read on how to proceed with it, and what Alex sees as well.
Yeah, my understanding is there is very little settled law in this arena. As we saw many lawyers arguing with each other about what any of this meant. And even the settled law these days in the US is not necessarily settled. We've learned that we're just, one court case away, one Supreme Court ruling away from having what we believed was settled law become something completely different. So even with a contract that may be in place, anything you publish, you're publishing at your own risk. So you have to weigh that risk. Proceed with clear eyes, with backup plans in case things go wrong, right? If you can't afford to put the money into a $2 million Kickstarter with all sorts of things, then think twice about doing it, because you could again have the rug yanked out from under you. It's less likely now, but there's still no, even if they do, even if someone does break what you consider a contract, you have the money to go to court to fight that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think where
again,
the
weigh the
OGL,
risks versus the rewards.
yeah, and where the OGL was before, rewind back time to say December, November, um, there was this sort of feeling like, well, the OGL gives me sort of this understanding of how to operate, and so we don't have to worry. But now that it's in the CC and it's a little different, I think it does make sense for anybody who's publishing to make sure that you really are abiding by that, because it may be enforced a
Mhm.
little more carefully, either now or in the future. And so be careful not to make the mistakes that some have done when they're using the OGL to just go beyond that, right? It's worth looking at.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of worth looking at, the new D&D movie trailer is out, and now we can maybe even watch it and enjoy it. So in our show notes, Teos did a great job of breaking down, like, scene by scene and frame by frame, all the cool D&D stuff. We're running out of time
Yeah.
already, so I don't think we're going to cover all of that. But what did you think, just in general, of the trailer, Teos?
I mean, as a fan, being able to come back post OGL debacle and really just sit back and enjoy this. If you watched it, back when you were mad, watch it again. It looks great. It really looks really full of fun and action. I can see why it's been compared to Guardians of the Galaxy and its approach that they took. I mean, it has that sort of humorous angle to it. It's got all kinds of amazing things like the city of Neverwinter and displacer beasts and jumping into a gelatinous cube to escape a displacer beast, and just endless numbers of hooks and lore. And I mean, it just, to me, I'm super excited. I have not been to a movie in a theater for a trillion years, but this might do it. We'll see.
Yep.
Depending on how many seats are available, I may go. But yeah, it looks really cool. The Forgotten Realms wiki team broke down all the scenes even further, but our show notes has all the breakdown of a couple of articles where the writer directors talked about what all of this trailer shows and what it means. And it's neat because just a lot of the guesses that folks have had are now being confirmed as to who's involved and what kind of story it is, and it looks really neat.
Yeah. I think I've said for a while now, if a hardcore drama loving D&D fan loves this movie, it's the worst thing that it could happen.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
want this to be the get everybody into the theater, happy, fun, right? Special effects, in jokes, out jokes, all sorts of things. Then when when we're on movie 5 of the whole expanded universe, then we can get the Andor, right? Then we can
Mhm.
get the super dramatic
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Let's not go for Andor yet. Let's go for Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's go for
Mhm.
fun, eat some popcorn, laugh a bit, marvel
Yeah.
at the in jokes and the special effects and the nods that the D&D
Mhm.
players can have. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And so far, I think we're on track.
Yeah, and
Any
that
other
ties us to
thoughts
an
before we move on?
well, this links us to this next news item we have, which is that the movie clearly must be high hopes for Hasbro, because they announced that they will have weak Q4 results based on low holiday sales, and this ties into previous strategy where they had said they would be cutting their workforce. They've used that, I think, as a sort of way to dovetail two things together. So bad Q4 results, cutting 15% of its workforce, which is significant, even if it was already
Mhm,
planned. Um, and all of this is based on really the sale of consumer products, right? Toys going poorly for the holidays.
mhm.
The Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming segments had strong growth. Hasbro Pulse continues to do really well. Licensing is doing really well. The president and COO will be leaving the company. So interesting news, and obviously I don't think it's really super reflective of the OGL controversy, but I'm sure the two things were factors everybody at Hasbro was considering. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think sales were down. I think lots of companies like this are cutting staff. We've heard of layoffs or job cut in like Amazon, or a bunch of other
Right.
companies are also
Meta.
doing it. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, Meta, I'm not surprised at all. Uh to be clear, as Teos said, what Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming is growing still, which is news that is not surprising, because that's what Hasbro's putting its whole company plan toward. And people that said, the stock falling because of this open gaming license controversy, on December 20th, before the worst of this controversy started, stock was at 55 a share. Right in the middle of it, January 13th, it hit a peak of $66 a share. So while everyone was freaking out for those 2 weeks, the price, the shares of stock went up about 20%.
Mhm.
Now it's down about 10%. As of today, it was down at about 59. So it went down about 10% since the OGL announcement that they're going to continue it. So the stock price has nothing to do with really this open gaming license stuff
Right.
or reality. Like most stocks, they go
I
up and
like
down,
that.
not based on anything other than the people behind the scenes who are making a lot of money on the stock
Yeah.
going up or down.
Yeah.
So, uh, so we'll always keep an eye on Hasbro now. Now, especially now, since they're turning their business in the direction of digital, of Wizards of the Coast sort of taking a lead in that.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Tyranny of Dragons reprint.
So, we had two books back at the beginning of 5e as the first kind of hardbound adventures. Those were brought together in 2019 under one volume, and now again with a new reprint. And I mean, the art is amazing. Beautiful new cover by Antonio Jose Manzanedo. The book is $49.95. It's out now, and I mean, if you love covers, I mean, here's another cover for you to collect, and it is a really gorgeous art of Tiamat, incredible, and it wraps around to the back. It's spectacular. As far as I understand it, it's just a reprint. There's nothing changed inside.
Yep. Lots of new Critical Role news. Not only is the Legend of Vox Machina out, season 2 is in full swing. They have announced that there will be an agreement to produce the Mighty Nine as another campaign. The campaign itself, the role-playing game campaign, ran from January of 2018 into the mid 2021s. Now the adventuring party, which is a band of criminals and misfits who are the only ones who can prevent the kingdom from plunging into chaos, is going to become its own animated series, joining the Legend of Vox Machina.
Yeah, and a
And they're
first,
talking about movies.
yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, first look film deal with Critical Role, and they're going to be using their own production studio apparently still, which is interesting. Their production banner, Meta Pigeon. So I think that is what I read that as is probably there's still kind of healthy revenue sharing on the Critical Role side, healthy involvement to drive the story and how things go. But that's amazing. I mean, 3 seasons already of one series, another season coming on, and a movie. Oof.
Mhm.
Incredible.
Yeah. So as we think about new games, we also wanted to update everyone on two new second editions of games, both 13th Age and Fantasy Age, two different games, but still in the same role-playing game sphere, are coming out with second editions. For 13th Age, there is a 2e playtest. The game was written by Rob Heinsu and Jonathan Tweet, who have been role-playing game designers on D&D in the past.
And other
You
games.
can go to a link which we have, other games, which we have a link in our show notes to Rob Heinz's blog, where you can sign up to become a playtester. What about the second edition of Fantasy Age?
So that's while the ones in playtest, 13 pages in playtest, and you can be part of that. Fantasy Age is nearly complete. They will have the book out in February, and you can already pre-order it and get the PDF for just $5 on top of the pre-order for the print book. The AGE engine is one that has powered all kinds of RPGs that Green Ronin makes, and so playing Fantasy Age is a great way to learn the other games. I also really love how Fantasy Age is sort of a simple D&D. It's a pretty neat system with some nice parts to it. That was a 2008 game, so it's been a while since that RPG came out, and now it's being reprinted. Chris Promise said that it's about 90% compatible. You can absolutely take stat blocks and adventures from the current first edition line and run them with second edition.
For those of you in the art field or looking for art for your projects, the Smithsonian has now shared millions of images into the public domain. So the Smithsonian collections, including photographs, paintings, sculptures, and more, they're all available for use with a CC0 license that you can use in any way, including commercial use. And that's at the Smithsonian Institute, si.edu/open access. There have been a couple threads we've been following on social media about sales for creators and sort of the woes of creating and trying to make a business of it. Do you want to summarize these for us, Teos?
Yeah, Adam Hancock, who created An Elf and an Orc Had a Little Baby, and then the second volume of that, shared on Mastodon a really great thread about everything that happened in 2022, especially looking at this project. And it's really fascinating, basically, that some projects are just phenomenal successes, right? And especially the sequel to Elf and an Orc Had a Little Baby, because Ginny D covers it, right? And it wasn't a paid sponsorship. She just mentions it, and boom, 3,300 copies of volume 1 and 2 are sold in 1 month, right? Making like around 5K, actually around 8K, 9K for those two. And that's amazing, right? And so life changing in a lot of ways from a small creator perspective. But then other products that Adam creates do not do as well. And he shares those numbers and thinks through kind of the whys of all of it. So really worth checking out. The other is Andreas Walters, who is often shared on Twitter stories about how hard it can be to run crowdfunding projects and make them profitable. He had run a while back an Owlbear plush toy project, and that raised $512,000 on Kickstarter when you consider the add-ons that came and kind of final backing. But when you look at all of the fees, platform fees, manufacturing, taxes, shipping, he has to date lost about $8,000, right? And that's just one of those things where you see the Kickstarter amount and you think, oh, wow, $500,000, right? Andreas must be rolling in it. No, negative $8,000. And he says there are additional expenses still, 2 more books, computer minis, other stuff that are not yet calculated in the costs. His expectation for shipping was $14,000 and ended up being $75,000. And he has none of these costs include him paying himself, right? So all of this time, all of this work to lose $8,000, right? That's how hard our industry can be. So it's just incredible, and my heart goes out to Andreas. I'm thankful that he's willing to share this so that other people can learn from it and think about the importance of trying to really nail down these costs and maybe even have agreements around them with providers. Because every creator that has had to deal with these sort of situations, it's so difficult, right? So check that thread out. It's also really, really educational. Well worth it.
If we often get questions about playtesting, so now maybe there's an answer out there. In Pesto's Guide to Testing on Crowdfunder, Pesto enthusiast is also known as Spencer Hibnick. They are one of the playtesters for MCDM, for MT Black, for the Uncaged anthology, and more. What Spencer did is release a guide to playtesting. What makes for great playtesting, how to prepare to playtest, how to track issues and resolve them, collecting feedback, etc., etc., etc. And Pesto is crowdfunding that at crowdfunder.com, and we have a link in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, it is Pesto's Guide to Testing. Last but not least, ENnie Awards. It's that time of the year again.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
want to take us through this, Teos?
Yeah, we've talked about the ENnies before. Their annual tabletop awards, they're very important to creators, even though there are a number of angles to the awards that can be difficult. And we've talked about them in previous shows about sort of the goods and bads, but there are essentially 3 rounds to the ENnies Awards. You, as a creator, can submit your work for consideration. Then the judges will read over all of that, pick the works they like, and they'll group them into categories. Many of the categories are predefined, but they have the liberty to get rid of them or reassemble them as needed. Then they will share that with everybody, and the public votes on them. And it's the public that then determines gold and silver winners in each of the categories, and they're announced at Gen Con. So you can now be a part of that. If you're a creator, you can submit any product, podcast, blog, tool, website, all that kind of thing, created between May of 2022 and April 30 of 2023. And so the submission form is open. You can go there and submit at any time. There will be a time when they close submissions, so you can watch their announcements for that.
We got through our news. There was a lot of it. Next week we will be recording from Winter Fantasy, so I'm very much looking forward to getting out there and talking with folks again. If you're going to be at Winter Fantasy, make sure you come up and say hi to Teos and me. So let's thank everyone for listening. We really do appreciate all your support, whether that support is monetarily through our Patreon or just listening and soaking in what we say and talking to us on social media. For those of you who are patrons, we really do appreciate it. Whether you are a Master of Dungeons, a special shout out goes to our Master of the Realms in our show notes. And we'd like to thank our Masters of the Multiverse, Craig Bailey, Steve Bissonette, Evil John, Darren Chandler, Robin Dermy, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Shawn Hurst, Brian King, Travis Lee, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Eric Mengi, The Micro Ant, Falcon Neal, Chance Russo, Krishna Simonse, Joe Tyler, Matias Valero at Twin Portals, James Walton, Graham Ward, and John Wilson. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you, everyone. If you like the show, please do consider supporting us at our Patreon at patreon.com/masteringdnd. Teos, where can people find you?
Find me at alphastream.org. Find me on AlphaStream at dice.camp, sometimes on Twitter at AlphaStream. Find me at Winter Fantasy. How about you, Shawn?
Also at Winter Fantasy, but also on Twitter at Shawn Merwin. The podcast Twitter feed is at Mastering D&D. We are also on Mastodon at Mastering D&D on Dice Camp, and I am on Mastodon at Shawn Merwin at tabletop.social. And we are also on the YouTubes. We have our very own Mastering Dungeons YouTube channel where you can listen, watch, and leave your commentary. So, Teos, now that the OGL issue is partly out of the way, at least, and we've covered all the news that's fit to spit, what are we going to do now?
Well, Shawn, I feel a darkness is coming. A terrible, terrible darkness. The kind of darkness that, really just invokes all kinds of fear. So I think Shadow of the Demon Lord is coming our way.
It is coming our way. The shadow, the Schwalb shadow will envelop us soon. Looking forward to it. Take care, everybody.